17-year-old Jakira Barnes had just tweeted out her location, and was standing outside of a house with two friends, getting ready to shoot dice, when somebody exited the passenger side of a blue Oldsmobile, and walked up to the group, taking out a blue steel semi-automatic handgun. The suspect, who was wearing a dark gray hoodie with a dreaded piece of hair hanging out, a black mask and blue jeans, upped the handgun, yelled a disrespectful line, and then started shooting. All three young people were hit, with the gunman yelling more obscenities as he continued shooting in different directions. One person was struck in the knee, and the other person was struck in the foot. Both survived. Jakira Barnes wasn't as blessed, receiving the worst injuries, having been hit multiple times in her upper chest, face and neck. She would die on some wooden steps, with the gunman standing above her, shooting her at least 3 to 4 times in the face. With such a brazen broad-day execution having taken place, many people question why someone would gun down 17-year-old Jakira Barnes. Just who killed her, and what was the motive behind the slaying? As it turned out, Jakira Barnes wasn't just your average girl, known on social media as K.I. or Snoop. Jakira Barnes was a young Chicago female who gained notoriety for her alleged involvement in shootings and murders in the Woodlawn neighborhood on the south side of the city. Born in 1997, Barnes was exposed to the brutal reality of gang conflict from the age of 1. Her father would be murdered in a gang shooting, with her tweets later paying homage to her dad, a man whom she never got to know. By the time that Jakira made it to middle school, to everyone around her, it seemed as though she was on the path toward success. Those close to the young girl would reveal just how sweet and kind-hearted she was. Although she wasn't your typical American girl, her tomboy personality was typical within the community of Woodlawn, a place where in order to survive, you have to be tough, as gang conflict is an everyday part of life. Jakira graduated middle school in 2011, and said that 8th grade was the last time that she really enjoyed school. Jakira wanted to become a social worker, as she enjoyed helping out children. However, the deaths of young people in her community would have her venturing down a very different pathway. Jakira Barnes would become affiliated with STL, EBT, a neighborhood gang set, also known as Tukaville or Tuka Gang. The name Tukaville or Tuka Gang comes from the unsolved 2011 murder of Shondale Tuka Gregory. 15-year-old Shondale Gregory was waiting for a bus with Jakira Barnes, and at least 4 other people when a dark-colored vehicle rolled up. The suspect got out of the passenger side, sporting a half-mask. He would walk over to the group, asking them when another bus was coming. Likely confused as to why someone would be acting so suspiciously, the group couldn't have imagined what was to follow. Whatever thoughts were rushing through their heads, contemplating if this was going to turn into a robbery, the group had little time to react. The suspect would briefly walk away, concealing himself behind the bus shelter. He swiftly returned, brandishing a silver handgun. Before the group could make a move, the suspect directly picked out Tuka. Aiming the revolver at Tuka, he pulled the trigger one time. Panic ensued, as Shondale Gregory was struck. Feeling sudden pain, and having no way to defend himself, all that Gregory could do was try his best to stagger away from the suspect, making it to a nearby trash can before being shot an additional 3 times in his back. The suspect quickly got back into the car and fled, with Shondale Gregory passing away at the scene. Undoubtedly, Tuka was the intended target. Gang members like FBG Cash and Wooski admitted that Tuka participated in shootings against the opposition. Clearly, someone wanted him gone, and the murder was carried out with ruthless precision. Jakira Barnes is said to have witnessed the entire thing, which further damaged her own mindset and future plans of success. STL-EBT would vow for revenge against the shooter, but for now, they had to deal with internet abuse from the opposition. In the months and even years following Shondale Gregory's death, the gang members said to have been involved in his murder would mock him, with his death becoming a widespread, well-known symbol for an easy way to diss STL and EBT. The dissing was relentless, with songs and popular Chicago rappers rapping about smoking on Tuka, a way to further insult the dead boy, along with his friends and family. Shortly following his death, a photograph of Tuka was manipulated, with disrespectful phrases being added by the opposition. Adding further insult to injury, the opposition annotated disrespectful lines onto a photograph of Tuka inside his coffin. The death of Tuka and these 2 pictures were said to have started a war. Barnes would begin hanging out with gang members around 63rd and St. Lawrence and 64th and Eberhart. Like many youngsters, building up reputation inside a gang requires you to be violent, and tolerate no disrespect. Essentially, the way to rise within the group is to become a shooter, going out on missions to bring pain to the opposition. For Jakira Barnes, the biggest ops were a set of black disciples known as Wick City, based in the Parkway Gardens housing projects, right down the street from STL-EBT. The Wick were said to have been involved in the death of Tuka. 20-year-old O.D. Perry had been riding his bike back from a Swisher Sweets store, when he was targeted by the opposition. Multiple suspects were said to have spotted and driven up to the 20-year-old. In short succession, the 2 suspects got out and started dumping. O.D. Perry was hit in the neck, falling off his bike before getting up in a desperate bid to escape. The two suspects continued firing, letting off round after round, striking O.D. Perry in the buttocks. O.D. Perry later passed away in the hospital. The death of O.D. Perry led to an informal name change of the housing complex as a way to honor him. Wick City became O Block. Shortly after the death of O.D. Perry, Jakira Barnes would begin publicly taking responsibility for the murder, with her own gang boosting her up for the crime. Reputation is everything, with Jakira Barnes and Rodney Stewart, aka Boss Trell, apparently bragging about the murder to fellow gang members. Furthermore, they are listed as the official suspects in the case. However, many still believe that Barnes falsely took credit for the crime. If true, the fact that she was able to false claim only served to humiliate O.D. Perry further. Not only had he been killed in his own territory, but he'd been taken out by a girl. In 2016, at least 5 witnesses verified to police that Rodney Stewart and Jakira Barnes were involved. This was confirmed through the supposed bragging in person, and through actual identification through photographs in relation to the murder. To this day, the entire murder is still debated. It is a puzzling and sinister case, as the murder weapon was used in at least 1 other murder, and 7 other crimes. The case was officially closed by CPD, and even though at one stage of the investigation, eyewitnesses had described seeing 2 black males, with each witness giving a differing suspect height, the deaths of both offenders meant that the case could be wrapped up and cleared without an issue. To put the eyewitness accounts into perspective, Jakira Barnes was only 5 feet 2 inches, weighing roughly 128 pounds. It would seem as though the contradictions have only added a new layer of mythology to Jakira Barnes, as to this day, nobody can say for certain what is fact and what is fiction. Now seen as a killer, Jakira Barnes would begin gaining popularity on the streets, and on Twitter. Barnes would tweet plenty of incriminating things in the years to come, with her frequently getting into online arguments with the opposition. Following these arguments, or deaths of fellow gang members, it has been said that Barnes would go out and start shooting. In one such instance, she was told on, and subsequently arrested. However, she was later released without charge. Given that she was on Twitter most of the time, Barnes would inevitably strike up conversation with rival gang member King Von, a man whom she believed would be willing to set her up and kill her. The two would go back and forth publicly, with their relationship even being mistaken as being one of romance. Back on the streets, and Woodlawn would become the scene of yet another murder. According to a close friend, this would be the murder that would destroy Jakira Barnes forever. The death of Tyquan Tyler broke Jakira Barnes completely. The 13-year-old would be killed whilst at a party, having returned to the neighborhood for a visit. Jakira Barnes would break down because of the death, falling completely silent as she soon adopted the Twitter moniker of Tyquan Assassin. By this stage in the story, Jakira Barnes had essentially dropped out of the education system completely. The girl who had been described as smart, and having shown real potential, was now on the path toward self-destruction. Having managed to graduate from middle school, Jakira Barnes was now destined to become a fully fledged gangster, as her social worker ambitions went out the window. Jakira would continue to use Twitter and Instagram to openly brag about her involvement in gang activities, including posing with guns and referencing violence against the opposition. CPD were now monitoring her posts, aware that her name was tied to the death of O.D. Perry, amongst other tit-for-tat shootings. In 2013, her name would circulate on the streets in connection to another murder. An O Block member named Jerome Howard, or J Money, would be gunned down whilst loading laundry into a car. Judging by the eyewitness accounts, it would appear as though Howard was lured to the house through a phone call. During the drive, another vehicle began following Howard and his passenger. The suspect and his passenger waited for Howard to exit the car. When he got out, one hooded suspect walked up to him and began firing. In total, Howard was shot 10 times. He died at the scene. Rawson Shaw, better known as Lil B, has been connected to multiple murders. According to CPD, he is the offender responsible for killing Jerome Howard. Many have said that Jakira Barnes was present at the time, but I couldn't find any evidence for this being the case. The murder weapon was located during a search in which Lil B and others were arrested. Barnes had been seen in videos with Lil B, and would take to Twitter to mock the death of Howard in the months following his demise. Similarly, rapper Wooski would mock Howard in his 2017 song Computers remix. CPD observed Rawson Shaw taking part in a hand-to-hand deal. Upon being confronted, Shaw would start running, leading to a foot chase. Apparently, he pulled out a pistol with a laser attachment and extended magazine, proceeding to point it at an officer. It was at this time that CPD opened fire on Shaw, killing him. An autopsy showed that Shaw died from 7 gunshot wounds. The community was in uproar over the killing, despite Lil B being listed as a suspect, named in connection to multiple murders within the same community. Once again the cycle of violence continued, with Jakira Barnes taking to Twitter to vent her pain over the death of her friend. Little did she know, her life was soon to come to an abrupt end. Unfortunately, Barnes's life was cut short before she could make any real significant changes to her life. All of her potential was seemingly sucked out of her when the shootings escalated in Woodlawn, as it seemed as though she felt obliged to become entrenched in the chaos. In 2021, her death was officially declared solved when it was revealed that Devon Bennett, aka King Von, was the offender in her case. Judging by the paperwork, other people were present in the suspect car, with it being believed that a man named Antron Young, aka Big A, was guilty, himself having taken on the name Big Aski after K.I.'s murder. Young died in 2016, never being convicted in the case. Later on it was revealed that Devon Bennett had actually been interrogated about the murder at the time, but he was never convicted of the crime. His story is just as insane, himself having beaten a different murder case, before becoming a successful rapper. In 2020, King Von would be killed in an unrelated Atlanta nightclub shooting incident. Jakira Barnes is now gone, with her legacy being one of death and despair. Although she was described as a kind-hearted person, her reputation for being a cold-blooded female assassin are what she is most known for. Her actions, both on social media and in the streets, led to her being murdered in her own community. Judging by her final tweets, she was feeling deep sadness and regret for how her life had played out. Having tweeted out her location, it would seem as though she knew that she was going to die young, never being able to make it out of Woodlawn. The case of Jakira Barnes is tragic, showcasing the two pathways that those living in inner-city communities can venture down. At the end of the day, although the odds may be stacked against you, the choice is entirely up to you. Either stick to your own ambitions, and become a success story, having made it out of a tough situation, or fall victim to the gang lifestyle, putting out bad energy, and paying the ultimate price. Rest in peace to everyone in this video.